All right, let's look at some ways of bringing our opponent down to a hip. Now, I'm sure Ruben is like well acquainted with like a lot of Professor John's material, so I'm sure you guys are all very acquainted with hip tilt breakdown, where you bring your opponent down to a hip, and it's a really valuable tactic to have in a match to bring your opponent down to a hip, especially against a turtle position, because once you place your opponent in this situation, he's all of a sudden has many different problems, some of them being lack of elbow and hip or knee connection here on the bottom side specifically, many times even on the top side, and that can create a lot of openings, okay? Furthermore, if your opponent's on a hip, it's much more reduced in his ability to explode, right? If you're on a hip, you're a lot less athletic than you're on two knees, or even on a knee and a foot, or even on 2 feet, right? So this idea of being able to constantly break our opponent down to a hip is a very valuable tactic to have in the sport of submission wrestling. So he's up on let's go referee stance. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I know immediately a lot of you guys may think that referee stance is a situation where it creates a ton of opening, but to a very experienced person that has a very well-educated referee's position, it's actually not as easy as just throwing hooks in, okay? Because what happens is a lot of times when, say for example, a person's in a referee situation, and I all of a sudden like try to throw a hook in, the person in the referee situation will feel the shift in the weight, okay? And a lot of times what has to happen for me to insert hooks is a commitment in my base, right? I have to sacrifice base in order to make a move, all right? So it's not as simple. What I'm trying to illustrate is that it's just not as simple sometimes as there's lack of knee-elbow connection, we can just throw a hook in, okay? Even from a position like the referee's position, it's oftentimes very wise to look to break people down to hips and elbows, okay? So we're gonna look at some ways of breaking a person down. This one we're gonna, it's a spiral tilt, okay? So from here, we're gonna be behind our opponent, covering his hips like so, okay? Now from here, we're gonna use a far hip grip, where I come through and I take the inside of my hand and touch the inside of Anderson's hip, no homo, okay? From here, I take my tricep, okay, and I extend it. The idea of extending my tricep is that I'm creating a motion going to our right, okay? So notice when I extend my tricep, both Anderson and I shift to our right. Did you guys see that? Okay? And if the guy's like super weak, that will happen. Like he will break down to an elbow, but let's just assume that he's not super weak, like he's been lifting and whatnot. Instead of breaking down to an elbow, he's gonna take this hand, he's gonna post it out even further. So we're gonna come through, I take my hand, and he posts that hand out further. Do you guys see that? That's the motion I'm trying to generate. That predictable post of the hand, okay? Knowing that I can predict that post of his hand, I'm gonna come through, and as we're going, go slow-mo, I break him down to an elbow, like so. Now, off this broken down elbow, stay on the other knee. Yep, off this broken down elbow, I come back to the hip, and now we break a hip down to the mat. So it's a two-stage process of breaking him down to a hip. First, I rotate him, and I break him down to an elbow. Most of the times they won't do this, like a dog pissing on a fire hydrant. That's just Anderson, okay? But don't be like Anderson. Don't piss on a fire hydrant. Stay up, keep good base, stay on your knees, and then from there, you get broken down to a hip, okay? So first I break him down to an elbow, then I break him down to a hip. So I come through, I use my far side hip grip. From here, I extend it, and I chop his elbow down. In order for me to chop his elbow down effectively, it's my elbow coming to the mat. So when I take my elbow, and I bring my elbow to the mat, it chops that elbow down to the mat, okay? So I extend, and I chop his elbow down to the mat. Now once his elbow is chopped to the mat, I come back to the hip, and now the hip's back down on the mat. Notice I'm staying on my knees. I'm not falling down to my hip. Make sense? All right, on 3, 1, 2, 3. So if you guys notice, I lined Anderson up so that his body is equally divided among the 4 quadrants, right? The mats are delineating each quadrant of his body. When a lot of you guys are doing this technique, you guys are thinking about taking him directly off to one side, okay? So what you want to think about doing is, this isn't so much a side-to-side technique, it's a more rotational technique, okay? So what I'm trying to do is, me and Anderson right now, we're facing the wall. what I want to try to do is I want to take Anderson to the best of my ability to this back neck over here. So the extension of my tricep, what that is doing is it's loading his weight to our right. So if you guys watch, it loads our weight to our right. But now, when I add the chop of my arm, it's going to land us over here. And you guys see how we landed over here in this direction. Anderson goes to build to his knees, and I break him down to the hip. Does that make sense? So the idea is that I want this rotational type of movement. Okay, it's not breaking them down straight to our sides. You're not going to find nearly as much effectiveness out of the technique, rather than if we break them down to the side. Yeah, this is the exact reaction I was looking for, just like so. Now from here, and I break them down to a hip. And now I'm up. You can stay on the elbow if you want to. You don't have to let go of the elbow. It's hard for him to build even if I'm on an elbow. Okay? So think about that as you're hitting the technique. Go ahead. Does that answer your question? Okay, reaction. So sometimes you try to hit your tilt and the guy's just not going down to the elbow for whatever reason. So we come through, I try to hit my tilt. I tried, but I couldn't get him down to an elbow. Okay? Oftentimes, even if you can't get the person down to an elbow, you can at least, with that initial effort, off-balance him somewhat. Okay? This is going to cause him to be motivated to want to return to balance. Okay? So obviously, if I off-balance Anderson to his right, he's going to want to recenter. Okay? So from here, what we're going to do is I'm going to come through. I extend my hand. I bring him to his right. As he goes to recenter, my hand comes over the orbital, and we catch the far tricep like so. Okay? This grip where I come over and I cross face him and I grab his far tricep is a particularly miserable grip. Okay? It really compromises Anderson's ability to be athletic because I'm severely compromising, like, basically his skull. Okay? Like, from here you can start to really manipulate people in a lot of different ways. Okay? But what we're going to use it for is we're going to use it in conjunction with our hip grip here, and I'm going to come through and I'm going to re-extend my hip grip as I use this my tricep grip, and I bring it to the right. So as I extend the hip, I move everything to the right, and voila, look what we have. A really large open space on the far side. From here I'm going to come through, insert a hook. Okay? Now, some of you will be tempted to just come here and just like hold on to this grip for dear life, but understand that that's where he can start like tripoding. Yeah, and now I start to lose it. Okay? So know what the grip is good for, and know what it's not good for. It's not good for, it's a great grip to manipulate your opponent's base, but it's not necessarily a good back-taking grip. Okay? So what we're going to do here is, once I do start inserting my far hook, we're going to start to transfer. He's going to be motivated to get this tricep back out, yeah, okay? Because you guys will feel it's really miserable when you're in that situation. So we're going to retract, come onto the far underhook. I take my knee, I drop my knee to the mat, and look what we have. Power half territory. I drop my knee over the far hip, we come through, and now from here we take it back, okay? One more time. So using a cross-face technique, come through, insert on the hip, we off balance right, he goes to come back left, I come over the orbital, okay? Understand, guys, with that cross-face technique, space isn't your friend, okay? So if we're in a situation like this, and I come way out here, and I try to grab the tricep, if he has a well-educated head, and he obviously doesn't want to give it to me, you won't get past the person's head sometimes, okay? With this specific crossface, you want to think about almost like you're going for a rear naked, except we're not going for a rear naked, we're going for this crossface technique. So the more you can use concealment of your hand to hit this technique, the better it'll be, okay? Again, it's not going to feel great, it's not a nice technique, but it's an effective technique, okay? Grab the tricep, we extend, that's that far space, I insert the hook first. I don't look to insert my knee from here. He can bump me, and now I'm off kilter, okay? Nope, I just insert my foot. Now, after I insert the foot, he's going to look to separate the elbow. I come through, and I get my underhook on the far side. From here, once I get the underhook, now I can insert the foot. Because now I know if he tries to off-balance me that way, I have something bolstering me to his upper body. Does that make sense? From here, you guys can hit power halves. There's a bunch of different techniques you can hit from there, but I'll let you guys experiment whatever you want to. All right? 3, 1, 2, 3. inside hip grip I've been teaching you guys, just to generate momentum and then be able to break person out to hip. So obviously, like, you guys have felt it, like, you're here, you're behind somebody, you know you should be breaking down to the hip, and you try to break down to the hip, but every time you touch them, it's like, oh, it's solid. And then you try to go back to the other side, oh, they're solid. And it's really, really hard to break them down to the hip. So like anything, like, if you can generate a little bit of momentum, it's going to help you, okay? So this next technique, what we're going to do is we're going to use that inside hip grip. We're going to feed our hand through. We're going to get Anderson to move to his right. Now, as he goes to recenter to his left, I take my right hand, and I take him a little bit farther than he wanted to go. So now he went farther left than he wanted to go. He goes to come back. Now he's farther right than he wanted to go. As you guys can see, we can use this inside hip extension to create more momentum than he wants, okay? So basically what you can do is you can use this to create openings, and at any given moment he goes to come back, I can break him down to a hip, okay? So you can use this right to left motion, 1, 2, 3, and now I've broken him down and he's on a hip, all right? So it's not something super fancy, but it's highly effective and useful, okay? Again, what you want to do on this grip here is you want to focus on elbow extension, okay? Extending that tricep through to be able to create the most off balance possible. Make sense, guys? On 3, 1, 2, 3.